Greetings, friends, and welcome to another ministry of the Victory Hour here on YouTube. My name is Jim Gallagher, the pastor at Clayville Assembly, who is responsible for bringing you this content on our YouTube channel, and welcome to it, and invite your friends to tune in and to check out what we're doing. Now, the last time I started talking about Memorandum 200 in the Kissinger Report. We're just taking a break for a little bit from eschatology. The last posting, I took that break, and then today. I'm hoping to wrap things up today. If I don't, I may have to do one more, and then we'll get back to apocalyptic language. And in fact, we may get to the subject of the new heavens and new earth. I got to think about that. But I've written to you about National Security Memorandum 200, which was passed in 1975. It's the Kissinger Report. It was brought about through the leadership of Henry Kissinger in 1974. It was adopted as official U.S. policy by President Gerald Ford on November 26, 1975. And it was classified for about 10 years, and then the Freedom of Information Act declassified it. And my context is this. Paul says in 2 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 13, "But evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived." That's what our leaders are doing. And when our leaders are doing it, I think Christian ministers ought to point it out. You say that's not their business. God's just concerned with spiritual things. No, that's not true. God will judge the whole world. And in the Old Testament, we see God judging nation after pagan nation after pagan nation for their crimes and their sins. And we're supposed to be salt and light on this earth as Christians. If we're so heavenly minded, we're no earthly good, then why does the Lord put us here? We can preach John 3:16 and then rebuke Caesar. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. Can we do that? Instead of these pansies that promote themselves as ministers that won't do a thing because they're too scared, they don't want to lose their 501c3 status or whatever they got the willies over. Okay, so Memorandum 200. You can look it up. It's on the Wikipedia. You can go to Encyclopedia Britannica. Just type in the Kissinger Report. Just type in Memorandum 200. You will see article after article after article after article after article. And you'll be able to find it in sources that you'll trust. And I've looked at the actual report. You can get the full report on PDF. It's about 123 pages. The Freedom of Information Act has released it, and it's online. You find it right away. So anyway, what was the point of this program that we instituted as official U.S. policy in 1975? Well, here I read from the encyclopedia, "The memorandum and subsequent policies developed from the report were observed as a way the United States could use human population control to limit the political power of undeveloped nations." Now, I asked the question last time. Undeveloped nations, that's other nations. We're going to use human population control to limit their political power, to keep them weak. How do we use human population control on another nation to keep them weak? How can we make them stop having children? That was the plan. And that's what they did. Don't worry. The details come out. And by the way, we're going to use human population control to limit the political power of undeveloped nations. These are third world countries that are poor. And we're going to suppress them and keep them down. Why would we do that? Yeah, I know. It is a good question, we're told. We would use human population control to limit the political power of undeveloped nations, comma, and it goes on to list other goals of the report. Ensure the easy extraction of foreign natural resources. They got stuff in the ground we want. If they get too strong, I'm giving you a heads up here. If they get too strong, if their population grows and they become stronger, they may resent the fact that the United States coming in, or anybody coming in, and taking this valuable stuff out of the ground that belonged to them, and they're getting next to nothing for it. And now that will limit us from getting at their stuff, and we don't want to have to slow down. So we got to keep them weak so they won't resist us. We got to have leverage over them. And that means we need to have the power, and they can't have the power. So we need to control their population. We need to limit the population in these nations that we're interested in that are poor in third world. Ensure the easy extraction of foreign natural resources, comma. What else are they doing? Prevent young anti-establishment individuals from being born. See, they didn't want anti-establishment individuals in these foreign countries where they're taking stuff out of their ground. Why? Because we would be looked at as the establishment, and we're taking their stuff, and they're getting next to nothing for it. So these anti-establishment individuals could give us trouble. So part of the report says, part of the goal of this program is to prevent young anti-establishment individuals from being born. How are we going to do that? Give it time. And what else are we trying to do? Protect American businesses abroad from interference. Interference from who? Protect American businesses abroad from interference from nations seeking to support their growing populations. We don't want these foreign nations that we go into interfering with our business, taking their stuff. Population control is key. In fact, the whole memorandum, 123 pages, is focused on population control in order to achieve all these goals. You just sit for a while and think about what this might mean, even without reading any further. But we'll read further. Under the administration of President Richard Nixon during the Cold War, his government adopted an agenda of enforcing human population control in order to prevent global spread of communism. Okay, wait a minute now. In this plan of ours that we implemented, our goal is to enforce human population control. Now, I thought that's something China did, communist China. You know, one-child policy. And then we're outraged. Guess what? We were doing the same thing back in the 70s to other nations. Oh, how would we do that? Patience, my friend. Patience. Enforcing human population control in order to prevent global spread of communism. The thinking was here, and there's a little bit of truth to the thinking. Doesn't mean the plan is righteous. Communists tend to go into poor areas. They go to the poor, the downtrodden masses, and they say, hey, you got a bum rap. And all those people with all those rich things of theirs, you know, they accumulate all the wealth, and they're just rubbing your nose into the ground. They're suppressing you. And what they're doing isn't fair. You need a revolution. We need equal distribution of the wealth. That's what would be fair. We're human beings. All men are created equal. Then we ought to have equal distribution of wealth. We need a revolution. And the poor that are starving and can't feed their children, they go for this. So, third world countries that can't even support their own people with food and medical supplies, and people die and they're suffering, when the communists come in, they're ripe for the plucking. They're ripe for the picking. And they're ripe for the plucking. and that's true. That is how they operate. The communists see a genuine injustice, then they go and exploit it to act as though they care about those people, and be their saviors, when in fact, they're going to make it worse than ever. They're looking to impose their tyranny on the whole world, and those people included. They're using them. So we're going to enforce human population control in order to prevent global spread of communism. And, we're told, under the advice of Major General William Henry Draper, Jr., supported the creation of the United Nations Population Fund. The United Nations Population Fund. Oh, boy. United Nations. I wonder what that fund's for. The United Nations Population Fund. We supported the creation of it. Forget the UN. But no, we were in bed with them back in the 70s. We supported the creation of the United Nations Population Fund in order to establish a global source of population control. Well, I thought we were going to make these third world countries depopulated. We were going to control their populations. Oh, well, we got to get somebody else to do it. We'll get the UN to do it so that they don't see us, see? In order to establish, we supported the establishment of the United Nations Population Fund in order to establish a global source of population control. And why do we want them to do it instead of us? To avoid an image of imperialism. Believing that future generations birthed throughout the world posed a danger to wealth accumulation, wealthy individuals and the U.S. government backed a policy of global population control in an effort to avoid blame. We don't want to look as though the richest nation on the face of the earth, the most powerful nation on the face of the earth, is suppressing the poorest nations on the face of the earth so they could steal their natural resources and keep them weak so they don't have any opposition. So get the UN to do it, and they won't connect it to us. It's a UN thing. It's like a global thing. The nations get together, and we decide these things. As a result, the NSSM 200 was drafted primarily by Philander Claxton and concluded that global population control was necessary to protect U.S. economic and military interests. Only neocons have military interests all over the world, not Americans. The neocons hate the counsel of George Washington in his farewell address. They hate it. I think it's one of the greatest documents in our history. George Washington's farewell address. Read it if you haven't. So we're going to do this to protect economic and military interests in the United States. The plan was created to avoid an appearance of, quote, economic or racial imperialism and, quote, not be seen as an industrialized country. We don't want to be seen as an industrialized country. Now, I put it in quotes because this is the wording from the document, from the Kissinger report. We don't want to be seen, quote, as an industrialized country policy to keep their strength down or reserve resources for use by rich countries. So we use a global entity to suppress their populations because we don't want to be seen as an industrialized country. We don't want to be seen, our plan, we don't want it to be seen as an, quote, an industrialized country policy to keep their strength down, these third world countries down, or reserve resources for use by the rich countries with a written goal. And that's exactly what it was for, but we didn't want to be seen for what we were really doing. With a written goal, right in the document, of, quote, quoting Memorandum 200, quoting the Kissinger report. The goal was, quote, fertility reduction and not improvement of the lives of people, end quote. We're lying when we say we care. No, we don't. The goal isn't to help those people, it's to get what we want. And that means people have to die. Poor people have to die. I am ashamed. I'm ashamed that our nation has done these things. Oh. We're told the policy gives paramount importance to population control measures and the promotion of contraception among 13 populous countries to control rapid population growth, which the U.S. deems inimical to the socio-political and economic growth of these countries and to the national interests of the United States. That's the real reason. Since the U.S., quote, the U.S. economy will require large and increasing amounts of minerals from abroad, end quote, quoting the document. We're acknowledging the reason we're doing this is because we need their stuff for our interests. We're going to sell it as we're doing it for them. It isn't true. And so we're told it recommends that the U.S. leadership influence national leaders and that, quote, improved worldwide support for population-related efforts should be sought through increased emphasis on mass media and other population education motivation programs by the UN, USIA, and USAID. All these organizations are were designed in part to get this done for us and to hide our sins and to depopulate these nations. So these 13 countries, in the document, they spell out who they are. India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Indonesia, Thailand, the Philippines, Turkey, Nigeria, Egypt, Ethiopia, Mexico, Colombia, and Brazil. The countries, we're told, are projected to create 47% of all world population growth, and those were the 13 countries we were targeting to depopulate, keep them weak so we can take their stuff, because we're the biggest superpower and we make the most efficient use of those natural resources. The poor don't know what to do with it. They refer to them as LDCs. You know what LDCs stand for? Least developed countries. That was my time. All right. How else are we going to depopulate these countries? Abortion. Abortion. We read abortion as a geopolitical strategy. A geopolitical strategy. Abortion as a geopolitical strategy is mentioned several dozen times in the report with suggestive implications. Quote, quoting the report, no country has reduced its population growth without resorting to abortion. Now, in the 70s, we had laws that said we couldn't use federal funds to support abortion, either at home or abroad. So how are we going to do that? Oh, they had ways of working around that. And if they didn't, there'd be no sense in bringing it up. Oh, but they brought it up. Well, let's read some details here. We read, the policies adopted from Memorandum 200 and 314, which made it official, advocated for the use of withholding food through food power. What's food power? We're going to achieve these goals by withholding food from these poor nations through food power. That's a concept that they developed. Food as leverage. Withholding food through food power and using military force to prevent population growth. Wait a minute, they're going to prevent population growth by withholding food from poor nations. And they're going to use military force to prevent poor nations from growing. With a memorandum reading, quoting the document verbatim, quote, in some cases, strong direction has involved incentives such as payment to acceptors for sterilization, or disincentives such as giving low priorities in the allocation of housing or schooling to those with larger families. Okay, so wait a minute. We're going to incentivize the poor people, and they get money so they can have food and live if mom and dad will be sterilized and have no more children. And another method is we give low priority in the allocation of housing or schooling. These nations are poor. The people are poor. We come and we supply schooling, food, housing. But guess what? If families are large, they're bad people. Because we got to get the stuff in their ground. And if they have lots of children, they get stronger and they might not want us around. So, disincentives such as giving low priorities in the allocation of housing or schooling to those with larger families. Now, we homeschooled our children. I have 4 children. All you people that have homeschooled your children, you tend to have usually a decent amount of children. Your children can't learn. Your children won't have a roof to put over their head. And we'll withhold from them food because you've got too many children. And people have to be taught a lesson. Such direction is sine qua non. That is a Latin for, it means something that's essential or indispensable. Such direction is indispensable for an effective program. You need these programs in order to really achieve population control. Depopulation. This resulted in proposing to foreign nations the creation of money for sterilization, housing for sterilization, or schooling for sterilization projects. It is just unbelievable. The Economic Warfare School said that the memorandum resulted with the United States using population control policies as a weapon of economic warfare against Nigeria by utilizing social blackmail to force sterilizations and utilizing food power. Let them starve if they want to have children. Using food power as a means of mitigating population growth. The EGE writes that Nigeria went from approaching potential nuclear capability. See, I didn't realize Nigeria had become that powerful. They were at the point then, back in the 70s, of approaching potential nuclear capability. They went from a point of approaching potential nuclear capability to a less developed country by these means, with the United States being able to establish control of Nigeria's resources and maintain the interests of American businesses there. Well, go read the book Confessions of an Economic Hitman. According to the Subcommittee of Inquiry of Voluntary Surgical Contraception of the Congress of the Republic of Peru, in June 2002. Memorandum 200 was, quote, this is according to Peru, the Peruvian government, quote, the global strategy defined for the last quarter of the last century, 75 to 2002, when they're saying this. The global strategy defined for the last quarter of the last century by the United States government in order to obtain a decrease in the birth rate, end quote, and was responsible for the involvement of the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, and forced sterilizations in Peru. So we go back to 1975, 76, and we were saying we have to bring mass depopulation to poor countries. There's too many people in the world, and I haven't given you all this, but they said, though, the population, the way it's growing, we won't be able to support it. Now, only third world countries that are advanced in education and knowledge can make efficient use of natural resources. These poor people, they just have babies and babies and babies, and they can't feed them. They have more babies, and it's just so, if someone has to die, we know who it has to be. And it ain't us. And by the way, if you think the United States was alone in this, you're wrong. Now, today, we have the climate change people, and the climate change people want the mass killing of the population of the earth in order to save the earth from global warming. You say, oh, come on, that's conspiracy theory. You know what? I'm out of time. So, on Monday, when I come back, I'm going to read to you a little bit about that, and then we'll tie these thoughts together and realize the magnitude of what President Trump is facing from these scoundrels. The swamp. And by the way, the Republicans in Washington, D.C. are just about 100% useless. There's a few good guys in there, and amongst the few good guys that say the good things, there's only a couple that is willing to actually do something. They can talk a good game, but when does action take place? They're part of the swamp. So what you have are two teams in the swamp. Team A versus Team B, and they fight for domination. But they both belong to the same league. So when we attack the establishment, the league itself, both parties come at us with guns blazing. And there's going to be false flags coming up. I'm pretty sure that's probably the case. And we're steering down the barrel of World War III, or I guess World War IV. They said, World War I and World War II, and they said the Cold War was World War III. Well, okay, if you want to talk it that way, World War IV, really World War III. That could be very imminent. We're supplying the weapons and bombs to launch from Ukraine to go into the heart of Russia. And Russia has promised to use nuclear weapons. If we supply them with those kind of weapons, we've already supplied them. So what's next? These people are insane. And they're evil. And they need to be stopped. They need to be stopped. But we can't stop them if we don't know what the truth is. And so we take the time to do this. So we'll take one more day to talk about mass depopulation by the climate change people. And then we'll get back to the subject of the parousia, apocalyptic language in the Old Testament, as it's employed by the prophets when they speak of the Father coming to judge the nations. And when you see the same language in the New Testament repeated for the coming of Christ, then make the connection, is my point. But look, I've got to go. My time is up. This is Jim Gallagher, reminding you in the words of our blessed Lord and Savior, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free."